If you've driven a new truck lately and thought, man, these things steer so much better, well, guess what? There's a reason for that. Yep, we're talking electric power steering, and in this case, we're talking high output electric power steering. Yep, no more dumping the power steering fluid in your truck and making a mess. Don't need to do that anymore. New trucks have this solved, and your next generation heavy duty trucks will steer even better. I'm going to talk with my friends from Nexteer. They're a supplier of these high output electric power steering systems. We'll talk about these systems, how they work, how they make a difference, how they're saving you fuel, and making your lives easier driving. And then, guess what? Bonus, we're going back in time. We're talking about Quadrasteer. Yeah, Quadrasteer. Guess what? Nexteer built that too. You know what that is? That's for all four wheels of your truck. They steer. Kind of crazy. Not science fiction. They actually still exist. We'll talk about that system and how they made refinements to it and how they could be coming out for next generation trucks and something you need to ask your truck manufacturer to put in their truck. Yeah, because I'm asking them, because I'm talking about it. That means, hey, Ford, Chevy, GM guys, and Ram guys who watch these videos, you need to give these guys a call. They got some good ideas. But I'm going to stop babbling, because I babble way too much. Let's get to the video. And oh, hey, one more thing. I'm sorry. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. My name's Tim. This is Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. And we do cool stories, reviews, news, stuff like that in the channel. Go ahead and hit subscribe, stick around, because it's a darn good time. Okay, I promise. I'm done babbling. Here's the video. All right, and I'm joined by Robin Milvac. He's just long title. He's with Nexteer. He's the big honcho at Nexteer. That's what all those words mean. Anyways, we're talking today about his technology with his company. We got a high output, Jesus Christ, high output electric power steering, and we have active rear steering. Now, before we get to this high output electric power steering, I have to tell you a story. I have a 62 Chevy C10 that does not even have hydraulic power steering. It's got the bus steering, right? So you grab the wheel and you twin, and you don't have to go to the gym because you use arm day making a right hand turn, right? And now you're telling me with your forms that you have a newer, more advanced high output electric power steering. So what is that?
Yeah, so maybe I start with the kind of the light duty truck market that has fully converted to electric power steering now. So if you back up more than 10 years ago, trucks primarily had hydraulic power steering. And then I'd say driven by fuel economy standards, the OEMs started to implement electric power steering because you save fuel economy, because with a hydraulic system, it's constantly running, circulating hydraulic fluid because it's running as an accessory to the engine. So whether you're going down the highway with no steering input or in a parking lot, you're still consuming energy from the engine. With the electric power steering, you're only taking away current from the battery or energy when you're actually steering. So driving down the highway, there's no steering input, so there's no parasitic drags on the motor, so it's more fuel efficient. So that's the industry converted to electric power steering pretty much across the board on light duty trucks and all passenger cars. And that's where we're at today. And I would say the OEMs, as they implemented electric power steering, they found some efficiencies of that technology as well. It's a cleaner technology. It's more efficient to assemble that in the plants because with the hydraulic steering system, you assemble the gear, you assemble the pump, you run the hoses, you fill the fluids, all of that. With the electric power steering, you assemble the gear and you're done. So it's a cleaner technology. And then you run into things like customizable steering feel. So with the electric power steering, all the big three truck OEMs, they want to personalize their vehicles. So we can program and customize the steering feel to be exactly the personality that those OEMs want. So that was another good feature. And then as the industry has developed all of these autonomous driving vehicles, there's a lot of technology going into these autonomous features, such as lane keeping, park assist, those kind of things. And the steering system being electric now allows the integration of those features as well. So that's where we're at today on light duty trucks, but the heavy duty truck market currently runs under hydraulic power steering. So it does not have the advantages of electric power steering in terms of fuel efficiency and all of these driver assist features as well until today. So we've developed a high output rack EPS system, which has the power now to steer these larger vehicles that are heavier than the light duty trucks. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, so when you say high output, are you saying like high electrical output, or is they take more energy from the battery to run these systems, or what does that really mean?
Take some more energy from the battery, but what we really mean is, so a large heavy duty pickup truck has higher steering loads. So we measure that in terms of the rack force. And a vehicle like a heavy duty truck is on the, the outside limit would be about 24 kilonewtons of rack force, whereas a light duty truck would max out at about 15 kilonewtons. So it's really the ability to drive higher rack loads through the system.
And that's really because heavy duty trucks have more maximum towing. So are you loading these trucks up with like I guess computer models and things as far as fully loaded? Like goodness, I mean some of these 1-ton trucks are like 37,000 pounds or some kind of crazy thing, right? I mean they're towing houses these days. That's what they're doing. And so you're loading these things up and you're trying to figure out how you can steer this load at that higher load limit.
Right. I mean, typically, the heavy duty trucks, they've got the bigger engines, you got the diesel engines in front, you got the bigger frames, the bigger tires. So all of that, we're really looking at typically what's on the front axle, because that's what you have to steer is the front axle loads. But then you have, all the payload and everything else that does contribute to the front axle loading. So yeah, these big trucks are a different animal compared to the light duty ones.
And it seems like, all right, so you're doing high output, you just make the box bigger. Done. Simple, right?
Right.
But I'm guessing that's not as easy as it went.
It's not. So there's a lot of mechanical challenges to transmit that type of load. There's a lot of electronics that go into a high output system have to be able to take higher current loads and dissipate that heat and run efficiently, because you're always designing for that worst case scenario. So the guy that's got his truck fully loaded, driving around in a parking lot. So you got to design the system to be able to operate in the worst case conditions. And so I would say technology advances over the past few years have really enabled us to design the mechanical system along with the electronics to develop something that can steer those high loads.
All right, Robin, why should we talk to you with Nexteer about this electric power steering system? I mean, do you use it in any of the trucks to marketplace?
Yeah, Tim. So I think the interesting thing about Nexteer is we are very much in the development of electric power steering for the full-size truck market in North America. In fact, we supply 9 out of 10 of every steering system used in trucks today in the North American market. So it is something that's a passion of ours. It's something that we work very closely with the big 3 OEMs in the US and North America on, and it's really where our competency and technology is focused in North America.
What about like durability of these parts? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's electric stuff, so clearly electric stuff's always going to break at some point. But hydraulic stuff, I guess, would break as well. But I mean, do you guys do long-term durability testing too?
Yeah, for sure. So all of our products are tested for the life of the vehicle. So we go through rigorous lab tests in our engineering environment that simulate the life of a vehicle. And every OEM has a different definition of what they want life of the vehicle to be. It could be 100,000 miles, it could be 250,000 miles. So we validate our products to those levels, and OEMs also, they do their own durability testing on their vehicles where they'll put our steering systems in and they'll run their duty cycles and they're validated as well. So the systems are designed for the life of the vehicle. And there's really, if I look at the warranty of hydraulic steering systems versus today's electric steering systems, it's a marked improvement. So even though the technology has changed, there continues to be refinement and improvement in overall warranty and performance of these systems.
Would you also agree that that's why the consumer is seeing these days where, like I drive all the new trucks and do that kind of stuff, but you see the new heavy duty trucks, to me, drive like the light duties did 10 years ago. And the light duties now drive like the SUVs did about 10 years before that, because it just seems like the steering input is so much less.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And that's the whole idea of having a customizable steering system so that you can program it. You can develop what type of steering loads you want the driver to experience, the assist levels that you have, how quickly it returns after you go around a corner. So all of those things can be customized to be exactly what the OEMs want it to do. And in fact, some vehicles have a switch that they can switch between, say, a sport and a luxury mode that also changes the steering feel as well.
Yeah, so that's what those switches mean, folks, which is pretty crazy, right? And by the way, if you're still driving like a bus driver, yeah, this is changing. This whole world's changing on you. Now you got one other thing going on here. You have this active rear wheel steering. No, come on. That's like a computer game, right? That's not something you do in a truck, right?
So if you think back in the early 2000s, 2002 through 2005 model year, GM actually had our product in production, and it was branded Quadrasteer.
Yep.
It was a pickup truck, and I believe they had it on the Suburban as well, heavy duty Suburban, but it was rear steer. And I actually owned one of those trucks at the time, and I can tell you I would buy it again today if they offered it. But what it does is it's kind of like steer by wire. So the back wheels are turning without a mechanical input. So it's all programmed. So at low speeds, the rear wheels turn the opposite direction in the front. So you can get these very tight turning radiuses. So if you're in a parking lot or you're rock climbing, you have very precise steering control. But if you're on the highway, the front and rear wheels turned at the same angle. So imagine going down a highway at 70 miles per hour and you do a lane change. Now the vehicle is just shifting over in the lane. It's not being pulled into the lane by the front necessarily, because both front and rear are steering together. And if you're pulling a trailer and you have Quadrasteer, you will notice a significant difference in the stability of the trailer, especially if you're doing like an emergency lane change maneuver. Without this Quadrasteer feature, trucks tend to have the trailer will sway if you do an emergency steering maneuver. But with rear steering, you can actually program it to take that sway out, and it's much safer and more stable in those type of conditions while towing a trailer. So the technology was there back in the early 2000s. We've done a lot of refinements and improvements on the systems. We're just waiting for one of these OEMs to pick it up and reintroduce it, because it's an outstanding product.
Well, it seems like it makes sense, right? Because the OEMs aren't making trucks any smaller.
True.
And those sons of guns are harder to park, and they're harder to back up. And they have this, rear backup trailer stuff going on, but they're not making it easier to drive with this Quadrasteer setup. So you had this back in 2005, and I think the reason I hear why it didn't take off was the price point was pretty high. Now, as things have changed over the years, are you guys looking at how to make it cheaper, for a better lack of term? I mean, that seems like the price point is the biggest thing holding that back.
Right. So if I remember, I'm not a GM marketing guy, but they offered this initially with a package of high-end options. So to get the rear steering, you had to get the deluxe of everything.
Yeah, those knuckleheads do that stuff all the time.
Right. So, but I would say yes. Over the years, we've certainly worked at commonizing the system. So if you look at the technology, it was kind of a unicorn back then. It was a rear steer. There wasn't anything else like it in the market. Today, as we've converted the industry over to electric power steering that we use in the front of the vehicle, a lot of that same technology now can be applied in the rear. So now you're driving economies of scale. You've got more volume to leverage cost efficiencies. So it's a more economical product today than it would have been back in that time.
So you're bringing, I was going to say sexy back, but that doesn't quite work with this. All right, so you're bringing that back. But I mean, looking at these two features, I mean, you're talking about steering with the power steering and active rear steering. So you're making people's lives better with heavy duty trucks.
Yeah, and it's more comfortable for them to drive the vehicles. A lot of the features that you would call them the autonomous driving features, lane keeping, for example. So the F-150 just released their 2001 model just recently. So that has our steering gear on it, and a lot of their lane keeping and driver assist features are enabled by the steering system that we're providing them. So it makes driving safe, it makes it better. There's also a feature that we call crosswind compensation. So imagine driving on a highway and there's a crosswind blowing across, or it could be you're on a crowned road. And if the driver consistently has to have an input on the steering wheel just to keep it centered because of that wind or the crown, the steering system can actually sense what's going on and then start to take some of that effort away from the driver to make it a more comfortable experience for the driver.
Really? Because I happen to live next door to windy Wyoming. The joke is if it stops blowing, everybody falls over, right? Because you're all leaning against the wind. And every time on I-80 west of Cheyenne, you see semi-trucks all pulled over. Now, granted, that's because they're riding empty, but there's a lot of strain on the driver driving through crosswinds because it really wears you down because you're constantly battling to get back in your lane. That's a really interesting feature. I think that would make a lot of sense. Now, I got to ask you this, though. So you're the supplier, you get all these new innovations going and it goes into trucks, but the truck manufacturers never say, no, that's next year. No, they're like, this is new F-150. This is all our features, right? Yep. So when you read these reviews, you watch my reviews on YouTube and you watch other people's reviews, and somebody says, man, the steering in this is so great. How tempted are you to be like, that's our product, by the way, enter?
We love that. Whenever there's great reviews of a vehicle steering system, we absolutely love it. And the great thing about it is we work so closely with the OEMs on tuning the steering to give them exactly what they're looking for. Whenever we see that, confirmation by people that are using the vehicle, I mean that's what we live for. That's the ultimate satisfaction in our jobs.
Yeah, yeah. You probably had a bulletin board. You pin this stuff up, and you just kind of write in Nexteer next to the names.
Literally, we do. Yeah.
Now, there's one more thing we have to talk about. This is not always the sexiest topic for me, but we do need to discuss this. Is we have these electric trucks coming out. We just had Lordstown do its thing. We have this. It's like a weird, like shaped, like Lego thing that Tesla came out with, called a Cybertruck. I mean, they got all this new technology coming on these electric trucks. Are you guys involved in the steering of these trucks?
So we are, and it's really interesting because you see a trend in electrification in the automotive market. It started in some of these smaller vehicles, but now we're seeing it in the full-size truck market as well. And some of these things are just crazy. They're talking about upwards, close to 1,000 horsepower on these trucks and 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. But the thing with these electric trucks is they tend to have heavier front axle loads because they're carrying the weight of this battery around. So they require high steering loads as well, which plays right into what we've developed is our high output rack EPS system. That is the technology that will help steer those heavier electric trucks in the future.
Do you ever sit back and see these announcements like 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds, so this, that, and that? And you ever go, how do you plan on doing that?
You put your seatbelt on and hold on.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's electric power and demand. It's just like turning on a light switch. There you have it. These numbers are pretty crazy when they talk about 0 to 60 and they talk about top speeds. I mean, they always leave out how long it's going to tow something, right? So they have these towing things. They don't say how far. They just say, you're going to tow for a while. But it's a very interesting thing to sit back and watch and go, really?
It is for sure. And it seems to be the trend right now. So, we want to be there to support the OEMs.
All right, I got to ask you one hard question. So we did the fun questions. So as a supplier, you work with many different OEMs. Do you, I think you kind of answered this earlier, but do you see quality standards difference between different OEMs?
So we see requirements different. So the requirements that the OEMs give us are certainly different. And so we're a global supplier. We supply to every OEM, or not every, but most OEMs around the world. And so there is variation in the requirements that they give us. Some automakers, if you go to China or India, for example, some are less mature than some of the OEMs in Europe or in the US, so they would have less requirements. But we still take, the requirements we get from our customers, but then we look at, what are our standards? Because in the end, it's a Nexteer system. So we're going to meet the OEM requirements, but we're also going to meet our own standards as well. So it's definitely something that we look at. There is variation out there, but if it's a Nexteer steering system, it's going to meet the requirements that we have as a company for that steering system.
So you're not going to roll back your standards to meet a price point for an OEM, are you?
No, we would maybe take out features, for example. So you might not get all the bells and whistles, but from a quality standpoint, we would not sacrifice that at all because think about a steering system. It's one of the most safety critical systems on a vehicle. So there can be no compromise in safety. That's our top priority is to never sacrifice on safety.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Hey, thanks for joining me today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate it.
All right, there you go. There's my interview with Nexteer. And Robin, thank you so much for being on the video and discussing your high output electric power steering and your Quadrasteer. Really interesting stuff. So put your comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Also check out this other video over here. I tend to interview lots of different interesting people, so you want to see these other videos. Binge watch. It's okay. Get some popcorn. Grab a beer. You have a great time on this channel. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you down the road.